The Kansas City Chiefs have overhauled their secondary in the last 2 years and get a new functional piece to put into it in Chamarri Conner. How does he fit and how does it affect the rest of it today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs fans, friends, and neighbors around the world. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next. We are here every day, 5 days a week over on YouTube, and you can get us there. Make sure you like, sub, and there. Click the bell right now, because that's where it all starts. You can echo down through the audio platforms. We're free and available on every single one of them. We're going to take a deeper dive into what the addition to the secondary looks like this year and what it means. There's been a lot of controversy about this particular pick. We're going to give you our takes, positive and negative, and what it means for the future of this group in 2023. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as NFL33.com and RGRFootball.com.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. When we start looking at the draft class, one of the things that I didn't really expect was Kansas City really making a huge move in the secondary. And while Chamarri Conner isn't a huge move in the secondary, it was an expected move. They needed another safety and another DB to add to that room after an overhaul last year. So this draft pick made a lot of sense and really fit where they were going with the entire draft class of hitting needs all the way through.
Yeah, and he's versatile and functional in a number of different ways. And I think reaction to the pick was a little bit overblown because I don't think there's a whole lot of VTech film out there. I'd only seen one game of his all-22 before the draft, since been able to finagle a few others. And as we went back and over at Rogue Analytics, we did a regrade. You can see some more of that over on RGR Football when you look for Chamarri's name. But on regrade, you put the film together with the athletic matrix and what he brings to the table. We all know the Chiefs, in particular in the defensive backfield, want athleticism in a very specific way: height, weight, speed, etc. Combined with production, and you tap that all out. You hit our algorithm, and what it brings out is that Chamarri Conner, if the Chiefs were just going off of our main metric, the overall grade, he'd have ended up being number 3 in this class at the safety position. Now, that changes when you go to corner because there are more expectations for athleticism, in particular at the corner. What you see here, and folks, if you're on the audio, make sure you jump over to the YouTube feed as well because you can see this visually. And as it all grades out, you can see the athleticism on this spider graph is around on the right-hand side. And you can see it's ranked 5, 6, 8, 8, 7. And that just gives you a rounded athleticism. You can do a little bit of everything. There's the overall athletic matrix. There's an explosive metric. There's a change of direction metric that I call short area quickness. That's the sack there. You can see one of his grades that I think people are underestimating right now. And then you have explosive range, which means he can cover that robber zone. And then you have deep range. So if he had to go back and play an actual free safety, which they have asked him to do, not his best thing in terms of eyes and instincts, in my opinion, but something that he's shown that he can do, you get a little bit of the athletic ability that's there you can rely on. It makes a lot of sense when you look at this profile that this is a Chiefs fit and always was.
And the other thing that I just noticed that I hadn't seen on this, what is this right? He's got a little bit of a C right on his chest there.
Amazing.
Yeah. Funny how that works out. Another team captain, Kansas City, likes to go that direction. So really, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you start looking at this, and Kansas City was going to always need another safety. We talked about that before the draft happened, so this made a lot of sense in that regard. But then you also look, he was one of the special teams guys that really could be helping in that unit as well. So I think that that's another bonus here that the team really saw. And, you know, when you start talking about short area quickness, you talk about explosion, you talk about that kind of thing. It's also, you also start taking that into account for covering kicks, covering punts. How is that going to play in? How is this all going to play together? And I think that really kind of gives you a better direction as to where this kid is going to fit.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the unique things. We saw a lot of complaints about this pick, people calling it a reach and that kind of thing. It's one thing if it's the fan base. Right. It's one thing if that's the fan base because, you know, especially all of us who are in Big 12 country, you don't get to see ACC a lot of games, right? But it comes back to the fact that this is what the Chiefs do. They find guys that are underrated for the rest of the league because they fit specifically into what they want to do. And I think that's what we have to remember. People were like, Josh Williams was really highly rated in a very similar range here, right? And then it's Jalen Watson that kind of came on early in the season. Now you have a pair of guys. We're going to compare them, and I'm going to give you guys all the things you need to know about just how good a fit Chamarri Conner is in the next segment. But I think what we're forgetting is that outside of the Indianapolis Colts, there are very, very few teams that could say that they are more specifically engaged in height, weight, speed, athleticism overall, specifically the matrix, because it covers all the areas, than the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, Chris Ballard was like a matrix draft, pick by pick by pick by pick. But Kansas City is very, very close because they're not going out of their way to get guys that don't fit their athletic profile.
And all of that, but I mean, you take it a step further, and you also have to remember that Kansas City is always going to be picking generally in the late 20s, early 30s. They have to have something that differentiates how they draft versus everybody else because they're not going to get high picks. That's just the reality of it. Unless they're trading away players, they're going to always have low picks. So you've got to find a different way to differentiate guys. And I hate putting it this way, but it kind of fits a little bit, almost Moneyball-esque in a way. And I say that because you have to look at players differently than the entire rest of the league. Obviously, it's not Moneyball. It's not to that aspect of it, but it is similar in a sense that you're looking at it differently than most of the other teams.
Yeah, and that's a great topic. We should touch on that in the third segment here later, folks, but we should actually do a whole breakdown on that show because there's a translation that actually gives you a more specific look at what it is for football. But Chamarri fits those ways, but how's he fit into the group? I'm going to give you guys some numbers, some ideas about how that lines up, what his true capabilities are, and whether I did it wrong listing him as a safety after I tell you about our friends at FanDuel, because right now you can make a fast break and get into the action. You can get a no-sweat first bet. It's a great deal. So you get to make a bet. If it doesn't pay off, you can earn up to $1,000 in bonus bets. Comes right back to your account. And so it's proofing your own first selection. It is predicated on making a bet that doesn't win, and that's the way that it works. But that $1,000 in bonus bets coming back to you is a nice bonus. There's no better place to get into all the action right now than America's #1 sportsbook, and that is FanDuel. You can find it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's right down here if you're watching on YouTube. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon for that no sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets. It's FanDuel, America's sports betting partner of the NBA, the MLB, and the NFL. Now, I'm not going to be able to show the comparison on this stream, unfortunately, but I do want to get to the point that we take a look at what people were calling an outlier. And I understand, like we were talking about in the last segment, fans might not have gotten a chance to see it. Analysts across the media world should have been able to decipher this. If I can find all 22 film as an average citizen and somebody who doesn't work for a giant television network, guys who do should be able to find this, because when you break it down and you look not just at the athleticism, but the production, that's where it starts to all make sense and come together as Chamarri Conner joining this secondary as part of the group. He doesn't have to lead it. He doesn't have to be a #1 shutdown corner, which clearly we'll talk in the third about the Chiefs' new philosophy. That's not what they're going for. But I think he fits really well. And what do you think is his biggest strength production-wise, Chris?
When you look at this pick, and this is something that just is sticking out to me based on your graphics right here, one of the things that Kansas City has been known for lately is blitzing their DBs. Mm-hmm. And looks like Chamarri Conner is going to fit right in. He's going to be a guy that they can send on a blitz. And at least for this season, and I hate saying it that way, but it's the reality right now, at least for this season, he gets a chance to be on the same team as a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, who does a fantastic job of disguising blitzes. And I'm sure that's partially coaching, but it's also player. You got to have your feet right. You got to have your body right. You cannot give away that you're coming to quarterbacks in the league, or you're going to get burnt. They're going to throw it right to where you're vacating, and it's not going to matter that you're blitzing. So that is a huge deal. If they can find another guy from the DB position that could come in and blitz at times and give them the ability to get after the quarterback that way, it gives you another edge. And I don't literally mean edge, but another
right, advantage, right?
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
The thing that stands out to me is, and you nailed it, is not only how often he was blitzed, but how productive he was at it. So when you take a look in the metric that we use at Rogue Analytics for where you make plays and how many of you that you make them, we have a couple. If you're just talking about pass defense, taking the ball away, playing the ball in the air, close contact situations, we call that hawk rate. And we rate every single prospect at safety and corner in every draft class. The Eagle rate is that plus where do you make TFLs? How many stops do you have on screens and in the run game, and combining it all together? And when you take a look, the reason that I mention all of this is because Chamarri Conner comes in at an Eagle rate of 10.88. That's right in line with where Joshua Williams was at 11.07. But that was at a much lower level of competition for Joshua, right? When you look at Jalen Watson, he came in at 6.67. And Trent McDuffie, the star of last year's secondary class, came in at 6.85. So nearly double the number of playmaker plays from Chamarri Conner at the ACC level than what you had two guys playing out in the Pac-12. That makes sense, and that translates to the NFL. That, I think, is the biggest trait that we didn't see pre-draft because nobody was really talking about how much he produces on the field.
Yeah, and the one thing that I want to point out, and one of the reasons that we're discussing this today, is there was a great interview. Daniel Jeremiah, I respect his opinion when it comes to the draft every year. Go look at his mock drafts, and listen to what he has to say about the players that are coming out. And he talked about the best picks or best value picks for all the teams in the NFL. Chamarri Conner was Kansas City's best value pick, not their best pick, but their best value pick. And if you think about how that plays into what it was versus what we saw draft day, where people were coming out and saying, well, you overdrafted him by a round or two. I mean, it doesn't mesh. It doesn't make any sense in that regard. Obviously, draft people are going to be all over the board on their different selections and where they think guys can go or should go. But I respect Daniel Jeremiah, and seeing him say that it's their best value pick on a guy that some people said that he was overdrafted by 2 rounds, I think that says a lot. I think that this is a guy that can step in, and I'm not going to say he's going to be a starter right away. I think the starting positions are taken care of. But 3 safeties on this team is almost a starting position. The third safety is almost a starting position with the way Spagnuolo likes to play. So this is a guy that is going to have a lot of playing time, and I think is going to really benefit from the rest of the secondary around him.
Well, and I'll put it this way too. It's where he plays, because I think we're all kind of sidelined by the fact that he was listed as a safety because he played safety his last season, right? A very diverse mixture of it, right? Some free safety that didn't play into his strengths. Again, I do think he has some of that ability, but he's got to hone that. But a lot of strong safety as a senior. When you go back and you take a look at 2021, things change a little bit. And that is where I think the Chiefs are really seeing the value here. Because what was I talking about pre-draft? What do you do if you prepare for L'Jarius Sneed to maximize him by putting him outside? What do you need? You need a nickel corner that you feel can go inside and stay inside and man that spot so L'Jarius can go out to the border. That's what Chamarri Conner did in 2021, his best graded year according to PFF, and the year that he was very, very productive. And so that's the thing here. It's not the whole can you play inside and outside corner. I don't think they're ever going to line them up on the outside. That's what obviously Trent McDuffie's for, but that's what Jalen's for, and that's what Josh is for as well. But now you have a guy much like Tyrann Mathieu was for Steve Spagnuolo, who you can drop in on slot receivers, and you're comfortable with his nickel skills, and you can drop him into Robert. And that allows him that chess piece underneath. Much like we saw to better effect, instead of being a box safety and a Robert type that we saw Brian Cook do last year, now it's like a coverage slot corner into that Robert role. And those two are going to be interchangeable. I think also it allows a little bit more freedom to disguise what you're doing with Justin Reed, and I think that may unlock Justin Reed as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest keys of this is it allows you the flexibility to move guys in and out of the lineup and in and out of wherever you want on the field. Just because you're bringing a guy in doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to know the type of defense you're going to run or the baseline of what type of defense you're going to run. You want to have as many guys as possible that are interchangeable, and that is one of the things Kansas City loves on the defensive line, but it's also showing in the backfield as well.
It definitely does. And how you play into the whole backfield, that's where it's a multiplication problem, not an addition problem. How does this affect what you do with Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed, both outside corners that can play inside at nickel? Does this allow them to lock up? Does this allow them to travel and really attack the number one receiver from the opposing offense? I think that's one of the pluses here. Probably not in 23, but in 24, I could see that happening. We'll see what happens with L'Jarius' contract in particular. But I do like the aspect of what this brings. But how do you go the next step? How does it fit into the full plan for this secondary? We're going to talk about that coming up next. So if you put on your GM hat, what do you feel this says? This particular pick, obviously making the effort to go get him and putting him in this group of what is already a very young secondary. What does it tell you about the bigger plan and what they're trying to do?
I think they're trying to do whatever they can to get as cheap as they can for as long as they can at all the most important positions and be in a situation where they can move guys in and out and they can have the most flexibility that they can possibly have. You're in a situation right now where L'Jarius is on last year's deal. Whether or not he's back in 2024, we don't know right now. I mean, it's possible he is. It's possible he's not. We'll have to see how that plays out. But the other part of the reality here is you have a cost issue with Justin Reed. And I'm not saying that Chamarri Conner is brought in to replace Justin Reed, but at the same time, it's not necessarily out of the question that maybe that is an option in 2024 just because Reed costs a lot of money. I mean, you're going to have to get cheaper. You're going to have to get younger across the board at all positions as you continue to deal with Mahomes' contract changing, and it may end up changing even more. We don't know. We'll see. But I do think that this is a play of, okay, we're going to get as young as we can on the secondary. We're going to get as many good players as we can, be as flexible as we can, so we can do everything that we want to be able to do secondary-wise. And it's going to be able to give us the ability to disguise what we're doing, and we're going to be able to attack offenses differently than we have been in the past.
I agree with you. And I think that plays into the more immediate way of putting it, which is I think the secondary is now mirroring the wide receiver core in that you want someone with some experience, MVS at the wide receiver spot, Justin Reed at the safety spot. But you're going to go a bunch of good athlete guys, not names, not quote-unquote shutdown corners or, absolute takeaway safeties. There's no Adams in this class. There's no Tyrann Mathieu, right? Like this is a bunch of good quality players with size, athleticism, and aggression, particularly aggression. That's what Connor's bringing as well. And I think it fits the mentality. It fits the bigger scope of when a lot of teams are trying to go superstar in either the secondary or the wide receiver spot or both. Now they're going to widen it out and spread out the talent across the board and take their lumps where they have to take their lumps, but knowing that they have length, speed, and aggression. I think that's the plan for them, not only this year, but going forward as well.
Well, you look at what they've continued to do. We've talked about this in the past as well. Wide receiver is one of those positions where you could almost consider it a premium position now at this point with some of the contracts that are out there that are going to those wide receivers. So now you're in a situation where you're mainly going pretty cheap at both wide receiver and this defensive secondary at both safety and corner. And maybe you're in a situation where you're not going to be paying anybody at those positions, which is actually quite different than most of the league will actually do because they're going to go pay a shutdown corner, $15-20 million a year just to be able to have that guy on their roster. Kansas City's looking at it completely differently. And that kind of goes back to what I said about the Moneyball thing. It's not the same situation, but it is very similar in a lot of ways because you're looking at trying to spend less money at different positions, not because you're relegated to not having enough money to be able to spend, just because you have so much money that is going to one specific person or a couple in this case.
Yeah, I agree. And so what does that mean for what we're going to see this year? For me, it means that they're going to start to pepper him in as soon as humanly possible. Is he going to play right off the bat like L'Jarius Sneed did? I don't think so. I do think that they're going to roll with Sneed on the inside at nickel, McDuffie outside, and Watson on outside on the other side of the field, with knowing that you have Josh Williams in there too. And we'll see if Josh makes a second-year leap. Maybe he can catch up and surpass Jalen Watson like he was in camp last year. That competition, in particular, between those two guys, I think is great. But then as the season goes
back
on,
and forth a lot.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. It'll keep driving them forward, and that's exactly what a big thing for the team. Yeah. So what I expect is that they pepper him in, game 6, game 8, something like that. Start to pepper him in a little bit more and change up what you can do with how far down or how often you have to drop down Brian Cook, who looks to be one of your split safeties with Reed now. Edwards is going to play a role in there too. I got to see how that comes together. But I think Conner is a guy that, because of his blitz capability in particular from the slot, it allows them to unlock what they're doing with L'Jarius Sneed. And so when they can get that in, as soon as they're comfortable with it, I expect to see it.
Well, and it's going to be very curious to see how it plays out in training camp, because that's really when you're going to get an idea as to how these players are going to fit into what they're going to do this year. I mean, we also have to remember that there were times where, a safety for Kansas City a couple of years ago was having a great camp, but never was able to make it work. So, is it a scenario where maybe you're going to see Conner come out and have a great camp and maybe be able to make it work this time? There's lots of different things that can go on between now and the season. So I'm going to be curious to see how quickly he can actually get plugged into play, because if you get to a point where Edwards is really your fourth safety versus Conner your third, you're actually in even a better position, because the more he plays, the better he's going to get, and the quicker he's going to get better. And that's just going to improve your secondary regardless.
Agreed. It's all coming together again as a group that spread the talent across the board. What do you guys think? What are you hoping to see from Chamarri Conner off the group, and where do you think that he fits in best? I know I have my opinions. We'd like to know yours as well. Leave them in the YouTube comments. Leave them in the Spotify reviews and the Apple reviews. We appreciate it very much. And tomorrow we have Matt Derrick. We're going to get the inside take at what's going on with the team at the facility and from what his perspective is. We're going to come back. We're talking running backs on Thursday and what this rotation could develop into. Had a couple of great questions last night on RGR that I think I'm going to put to you, Chris, so we can get a little bit of a theory going. And then we're going to come back Friday and we're going to give you our initial projection of what this season is going to look like in terms of win, losses, big games, that kind of thing for the Kansas City Chiefs. We hope that you will join us. Thank you for your time. Chris, anything else that I forgot?
No, I think you covered it all. I think we're going to have a lot of fun coming in the coming weeks. We're going to be getting more deeper reviews into the roster as the offseason starts to progress a little bit further. So be watching for that. And the everydayers, you're going to have a lot to listen to, because we're going to be keeping it real 5 days a week.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We hope you will continue to join us all week long. Thanks for listening today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.